Welcome to the Inner Knowing podcast with Erin Rogers. We are going to take some time today to talk about my story, where I came from, how I got here. And the overall theme, ideally, is what we'll notice in what's shared is my intention of my own journey inwards to realize that I had all the answers I was seeking and that you have the same for you, meaning you hold your answers and perhaps you need others to help facilitate the discovery, the inward journey. You don't want to walk alone. And while I don't know everything for sure, something I do know is that you hold your ultimate truth. There's nobody outside of you that knows your ultimate truth in greater connection, detail from your heart space than you do. And for me, that was the inspiration of sharing, and even why I show up on the internet is the intention that you hold all that you desire, that you are requiring in life, and you are more than welcome to invite other people to support you, to help you gain knowledge and understanding, someone just to show you the way that maybe you've been too scared to walk. But they don't hold your truth. Perhaps they're just the person you feel like should facilitate your next step in the journey of your own discovery. And I get pretty upset when I see people selling, offering, creating any sort of illusion that they have an answer that is greater than the answer you hold for yourself. And so my own journey through this realization was an interesting one. I am the oldest of 4 kids. I come from a massive extended family. When I was 18 months old, I was burned by tea and hospitalized for a month, which I don't know if you've ever had anything that happened in your childhood that was maybe significant, but we would talk a lot about it. I would reference it. I could tell you the story of it, no matter how old I got. But it wasn't until the last year or so I realized it actually had an impact on me, meaning it was dictating a lot of my experiences, especially in relationship. We'll come back to that. I went to a religious school. I had a tight community. Everything was very known. My parents met at a very young age, got married very young. Almost, that concept of like leave it to Beaver. And I never fit. I'm sure most of you listening have your own version of never fitting. It felt like I was always trying to figure it out and fit in the mold. Instead of like learning the English language as a child, I memorized it. The teacher's like, that's an interesting skill she has. It was never quite the same as everybody else. And so that went on where I could really figure it out and fit in, but just didn't quite work. And so I went through my adolescence into my teen years, and by the time I was finishing high school, I was like, I fucking have had it. I still maintain to this day I love learning. I hate school. Maybe for the socializing, and had done well, but was like, I am fucking over this shit. And so luckily, an intuitive moment now that I realize I had, I was accepted into an exchange program. And funny enough, I wasn't accepted right away. And I was waitlisted. And this is one of the first bigger events I can remember in life where I remember being like, doesn't matter, I'll get in. And I got in with my first choice, which was very uncommon. And so at 17 years old, I moved to France for a year as an exchange student speaking no French. And to say it was a wild ride would be an understatement, but became fully fluent. And for the first time in my life, saw a reality outside the one I'd grown up in. And for me, I think this was a pivotal moment to realize, like, just because something was familiar doesn't mean it was for me. And it cracked open the possibility that there was something else outside that I could create in the world for myself. Was I that self-aware at the time? No, but it was very eye-opening because you live with host families, so you get like a real variety of life. I got so lucky to live with 10 host families instead of the normal 2 to 3. But my little Sagittarius soul was fine moving every 6 weeks at 17 and 18 years old. And went back to Canada. Was like, this is not it. But come from a long line of educators, so went to school, was like, fine, I can do university, but I don't like it. And then a year and a half later went to Australia, which is a very funny story, but basically to go figure out, like, what the fuck is up with being an adult. Anywhere from meeting men, let's be real, they probably were boys at the time, to like just figuring out how to be in the world without anyone else's structure. I didn't do well. It took me a while. I was definitely a bit of a hooligan figuring out the world, but later on found out that matched my human design perfectly. So did that, came back and was like, I'm not going back to the small town my parents were living in. Lived in Vancouver and kind of just committed to like, I should do the thing that I was told if I do it, I'll be happy. And since I had been 8 years old, I'd been making my own money. I was a pop bottle return hustler at 8 and did a bunch of jobs and always kind of made money and figured it out. And had had this vision at 8 years old that I would own a house with a porch. Very interesting thing for an 8-year-old. But I got into a sales job and I was like, okay, great. Don't want to be a teacher, even though that was my only path laid out by my family. And I was like, I don't really know what the sales thing is, but it seems like I might be good at it. And so I took on this role and I was like, happiness is buying a home, finding a partner, having children. That was my whole criteria. I was like, great, perfect. This complete misery that I was living in to get there, I was like, doesn't matter because I will become happy once I acquire those things. Great, problem solved. So from 23 to 26, I worked like a fool. I worked long days, paid off debt, saved money, and at 26, I got pre-approved for a mortgage. Everyone I saw asked me if my dad was signing with me. Ooh, I was mad about that. And purchased this apartment because I lived in a very expensive city. And I remember I purchased the apartment, and the day I moved in, like 3 months later, was the worst day of my life. Because now the dream was gone. I had attained the dream. The hope was gone, and I realized, fuck, this ain't it. This is not the holy grail of happiness that I thought I would come to. What the fuck am I going to do now? There will be swearing on this podcast. And I looked around, and I'd had a lot of people say things like, well, you're just an angry person. You're highly competitive, driven, angry, but, you know, whatever, you make it work. And I'm being like, I would not consider myself an angry person. I can get fired up. And my 20-year-old self, my 27-year-old self at the time, impressively looked around and said, if I am the common denominator in all of my experiences, it must be me and not the experiences. How I figured that out at the time, I have literally no idea. But thus began my seeking in a very active way. And so seeking for me started with therapy, which I loved because it was very validating at the time as someone who felt like she hadn't been seen or validated. It's where I probably first really cried and just felt held. So therapy was amazing. And I kind of just stopped doing anything else that wasn't working for me. But I sat on my couch for 2 years and realized life wasn't going to happen from my couch either, which was an inconvenient truth. Because I still held some of that, like getting married, having children, magically will happen to me and I will just bibbidi-bobbidi-boo. That happiness portion will come. And so for me, the work went from being validated to the self-ownership, where I had a friend, she's like, you have a really great story and you have a really good reason to be mad or validated in the way you are. But she was like, do you think you might want to become greater than that story and live beyond it? I was so mad and fearful. Mad and fearful. Like, how the fuck dare you? And also, what will I do without this story? This story keeps me safe, protected, validated, and not having to go out and do the next scariest thing. But because of who I am, I guess I still decided to go forward. And so around 30, which if anyone's been through their Saturn return, you know things shift. I started to shift and soften. I shifted my relationship with my body to a degree, but in a very unhealthy way. I shifted my relationship to work by not taking the hardest jobs with the most demand, although I quickly returned to that. And I started to shift my curiosity. So growing up highly religious, even though I would say quite religious. We went to church. I was in a Catholic school. Everyone I knew was Catholic until I was about 12. I had a bunch of unknown beliefs that lived inside of me. I started going to Catholic school at 3 years old. They really indoctrinate you. And so seeing a tarot card reader was my first big thing at 30 that my dear friend sent me to. And I remember being like, I might burn in hell. And I was like, I don't even know where that belief comes from. That certainly wasn't taught at church, but just having that knowing. And so I went and I told her this story of being woken up, feeling pregnant. The whole thing was blue. I could feel the baby inside of me. And I knew the person that was pregnant. I messaged them. It took them maybe like a month or two to come back to me. But I basically messaged them the day they conceived. They were conceiving. She's like, yeah, babe, because you're highly intuitive. And I was like, I don't know. That sounds like witchcraft. What am I going to do with that? But it was the first time I started to take stock of all the things that had happened to me and how I'd had these wild visions. I was like, oh, I just thought it was deja vu, but I would know when it was going to happen. So it was precognition. And all these stories started coming out from my family. And thus began, maybe there's something else for me outside of this very, I will just say from my own experience, Capricorn existence. Of make the money, acquire the assets, become a workaholic, find the partner, make the family. To me, that's very traditional. And nothing about me and my actual essence, I would say, is traditional whatsoever. And so I started going to events. Let me tell you, Tony Robbins became my favorite person, just that kind of stuff. If I could just get excited enough and change. And I did a lot of those workshops, but I kept butting up against, where's the answer? I would always say, I feel like I have the key, but I can't find the door. And I thought I could just pay my way to the door. If I just paid for enough sessions or realizations or meditations or breath work or therapy, or I found the right partner, because listen, that was still my toxic trait, the answer would come. That's all that was missing. If I could just this and that, because I'm a highly mental person, for better or worse. And things in my life started to shift as I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm kind of intuitive. Maybe I'm kind of this thing. And by 35, I was like, okay, fucking something's got to change. I had bought my second property. Wasn't any happier, although it was way nicer. So I did love that. But I was like, is this life? This is it? This isn't going to hit. I'm not meeting my life partner. I'm working all the time. And this just isn't joy. And this is around the time I started really thinking about, I had gone to makeup school part-time while I was working, because I started to use the analogy that when I'm on my deathbed, what will matter more? The money I spent or the money I saved not trying the thing. And so, while maybe that might feel morbid to some of you, I think being aware of an end date at some point helps me make choices that are in deeper alignment for myself. So I did the makeup school, tried working less demanding job, tried the travel, just figuring out how and where I want to spend my money and what would support me in my own exploration. Because I do believe that I am my greatest asset, just like you are your greatest asset. And so if I invested in myself, I would get farther along. And then I was like, but this still isn't working. I was in a job and they just didn't see me beyond being an individual contributor. And I was pissed. But I was a victim to it. Meaning like, see me, pick me, know that I can do it. Even though I'm not acting as though, I'm not showing you any traits. And they did this 360 on me that, in my opinion, was savage. It was so brutal. It was like their way of shutting me down. Again, I don't know this for sure. This is just my opinion. And I remember being like, nah, bitch, this ain't it. Something has to change. And so another organization had been reaching out to me pretty consistently. And so I was like, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to tell them what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to show up in this job if I get the job. And I'm going to act as though I'm in the job that I actually want. And this is the thoroughfare. I'm going to stop taking things personally and do my best to see them more objectively. And I am going to like be softer and kinder with myself. And this was when I was starting to like, okay, I'm intuitive. There's things happening. Let's go and embrace these parts of myself. And the perspective shift worked. I came in day one. I was like, oh, this is not a very strong team environment. I'm going to be the one that brings everyone together. I got promotion after promotion. And listen, it was the right company to be at. But all of those things, I went from individual contributor, then I got one person under me, and then two people, and then I convinced them I could be a manager. And then I was a great manager, so I got to do the next thing. And by the time I left, I think I was a senior manager or director. I was managing 2/3 of the company's hiring. I had overseen all the company's hiring at one point. I'd hired in 14 countries. I'd done all these things. And something that's really important for me on this journey that I've been on is like, get the thing you need when you're there. Meaning, what were the lessons I needed to learn or that I wasn't learning in other jobs, that if I fully embraced this job, I could get them, understand them, embrace them, embody them, so I didn't have to carry them forward again, because they just get harder when you carry them forward. And so for me, I was like, I'm going to just like max out and see if this HR and recruitment thing really isn't for me, because I'm good at it, but I never love it the way I want to. Or is it that I have to go figure out something else? And so I loved it. I got to travel to like London every 8 weeks and Toronto, and I got to go almost down to Mexico City and Australia and all these cool things. I loved everyone I worked with. I had the coolest team. We were doing interesting things, and I was getting the wildest job opportunities that were like offensively amazing. And it really helped me say, like, I feel as though I have done the most here, and it still isn't it. Which was a beautiful gift for when I did end up leaving that career, because there was no questions, right? I don't want to leave with a question. I want to have played full out, even if that's hard. But during this time, I got deeper and deeper into my spirituality, meaning reading obsessively, going to experiences, doing breath work, doing meditation. But I also, because I was working so much, was getting sicker and sicker. And near the end of this whole sort of experience, I guess it was 2019, I got really sick on a trip. And I was like, you know what? This is greater than physical illness. There is some sort of crazy amount of stress in my body that the combination means something's got to give. This has got to be spiritual and physical. And again, probably 4 weeks before that, I had been on a trip with a friend whose parent had passed away. And I was like, are you okay? They're like, yeah, I'm okay. And kind of just there to like help them just integrate, post that a big experience for them. But they looked at me and they were like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm great. And they're like, no, but are you okay? And I just lost it. I was like, I'm not okay. I don't know what to do. I've tried, and you should just know, when we get this into the future, I've tried every diet. Had a really long process with thinness is love. We were still in that process. I've tried every diet. I've got as thin as I've ever could be. I had boyfriends. I'd get thinner each time to make sure I could be in the relationship so they would stay. It wasn't it. I'd tried all the work things. I'd worked my fucking ass off. I'd tried dating men, but it was always falling short. And I was like, well, I'm just not enough. And so it was like everywhere I looked in my life, I felt like I was trying the hardest, but I wasn't getting the thing that felt like true in my own heart. And I just said to her the same thing I said before. I have the key, but I can't find the door. And I think they said, like, don't do anything else outside of yourself anymore. You have to go inward. And I literally had a visceral reaction like, fuck you. That is the last place I want to go. What's inside of me is so painful. I don't want to go there. A month later, I get sick. I look up a doctor I used to have that I heard became a spiritual coach. What is life? And so I go and I book an appointment with this doctor who's no longer practicing as a spiritual coach. But I'm like, at least they'll be able to bridge the concept in my mind of this is not just physical, but I do probably need some physical support. This is spiritual. And so I get to this point and I sit in her chair. She explains what she does. And she's like, why don't we just sit here and we'll just see what happens. And she starts talking. And for me, what happened was a white light opened up over my crown. This gold energy poured all over my body. I felt, I would say, pure bliss. And I felt paralyzed, like I couldn't move. And I remember just staring at her and go, I can't move anything in my body. What's happening? And she's like, yeah. So I think you're highly intuitive and we're just connecting you back to parts of yourself that you've denied. And I was like, I don't know what you're saying. Confusion. We all have our defense mechanisms. Confusion and humor are a few of mine. And when I explained to her the way that I had experienced my, I thought, inner voice, she's like, that's not your inner voice. That sounds like spirit guides and something higher than yourself helping you often. And like even your present day self going back and supporting your younger self. And I was like, oh, I don't know what you're saying, but okay. And so I left the appointment. I signed up to work with her. And I remember I had to like sit on grass for an hour before I got in my car because I was like, I'm high as fuck. I don't even know what the hell just happened. And I read this book that she had recommended, which I recommend to lots of people, I think it's called Open to Channel. And she had been kind to be like, just, you don't know how this is going to go. It might take you some time. And I read the instructions. And as soon as I did that and closed my eyes, the way I experience it is I'm in a body here. And whether you want to use prayer or meditation or channeling or being in that state, it always feels like I go up into, I guess, like a dream-like reality. Like I always feel like I'm zipping up is the only way I could describe it. You see in a movie, you're like, poop, I pop up into the clouds. And so I pop up into the clouds of my own imagination or however you might believe it's true for you. I'm at a table, a wooden table. And I will say lots of my references will sound somewhat Catholic, which is probably the lens or the filter that I have. And there's 12 purple triangle heads sitting around the table, right? 12 apostles, we love it. And it was as normal as it would be sitting right here at the table. Like I can't describe it any other way. And I'm like, I'm in shock. I'm like, hi, what's going on? What's happening? And they respond, fuck, this has taken you a long time. Because your spirit guides or your team will be an extension of your personality. I'm like, huh? What do you mean? I just got here. It seems like I've been trying to they're like, we've been trying to wake you up for 5 years. You have? They're like, you're stubborn. Why did you? I'm like, what? What do you mean 5 years? This must be like a helpful trait at some point. They go, maybe. But goddamn, and they start giving me all the examples of times when they had tried to wake me up. And I was like laughing with them, like, what the fuck? It was just like the funniest, weirdest thing. And they were like, yeah, like this is who you are. The person you're stepping into right now is intrinsically who you are. This other stuff you've been doing has been part of your life plan. You've come so far, but we really need you to get on the program with us, meditate, be in connection. We've got a lot of work to do. We need you to get going. I remember being like, should my spirit guides be critical and have a timeline? This seems unusual. And I'm sure more happened, but it was like a pretty funny experience, but it felt so comforting to the point where I started meditating like 45 minutes to an hour every morning, because it just felt like for the first time I was experiencing something that felt normal to me. I didn't feel uncomfortable in my body. And I believe I told a friend, or the way I often describe it was, my whole life up until that point, I felt like a fish trying to fly. And someone finally put me back in the water, and I was like, oh, I can breathe. Because the most natural thing for me to do is to channel, is to move from my intuition, is to be logical, but to be in flow and to be deeply present with whoever I'm sitting with in that moment. And so all the ways I was showing up in the world, I had adapted to, I had learned, I'd figured out, I had been, I suppose, smart enough or resourceful enough to like figure out how to live in this box, this mold, the way that I had been presented to the world through the family I came in with. But none of that was ever easy. It was always hard work. And as soon as I stepped in, it was like everything made sense. I'd also before that found my human design and my astrology and my astrocartography. All of them were like, you're highly intuitive. You're highly intuitive. And I was like, well, what the fuck am I gonna do with being highly intuitive? What, am I gonna be an astrologer? Bitch, I became an astrologer. Because I think that was always my issue, was like, well, how will I transition? But what happened after that, I think it was March or April 2019, I just started going to intuitive sessions, talking to people. I was in a store one day after I'd seen another tarot card reader because she was still looking for the answers outside of herself. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to start this soul mapping. Someone in the store turned around and said, what is soul mapping? I gave an answer, and she bought a session on the spot. And I was like, okay, so something's really going on here. Got it. And by June of that year, a friend and I were going to a lake, and she was asking me a question in the car on the way there, and I answered in a way where she's like, what did you just say? I go, well, you know, like the answers that show up in your mind when you ask questions. And she goes, no, what are you talking about? I go, like there's ticker tape in your mind that you can read, and I'm reading it, so when I'm responding to you, I'm responding from that. And she goes, that's not a thing for people. I go, yeah, no. So we go to the lake. I end up channeling for her for 3 hours that day. I'm talking to her grandpa who has passed. I'm talking to aliens. I'm talking to future and past and looking into Egypt and like the craziest stuff. Don't recommend doing it for 3 hours your first time. But it was like, she was like, so this is your thing. Just so you know, whatever you think you're doing, this is your thing. And so I signed up for my first spiritual retreat that would happen a few months later. But I was just trying to like figure out, like, I don't understand how this will be my thing. I had started offering human design readings and astrocartography readings, kind of just like, ironically, I'll trial and error it out, which is my human design. And by September of that year, 2019, I went to this spiritual retreat in Sedona, Arizona. And I was like off the hook intuitive. It'd be like someone's like, oh, I can see a symbol. And I'm like, cool. I can see your spirit guides behind you with a fishing pole dropping the symbol. But like not knowing that this was like, to be honest, I think it was a bit triggering for some people. And that's fine. But just like could see through things. Like it was insane. And so as the whole thing wrapped up, I was like, okay, we've got to like figure out how to make this my career. In the next 3 to 4 years, I'll make a transition. As I'm leaving Sedona, my spirit guides tell me not to leave Sedona. I go, well, I'm not gonna, it's expensive here. I got a flight, like I'm not gonna not go. As I'm driving to the airport, there's a storm, but where I live, like whatever, we just keep driving, Canadians, we don't care. And we're driving and my car gets hit by lightning. I have a passenger in the car because otherwise I think I wouldn't have believed myself. A fire starts in the middle of the highway because that's where the lightning like diverted. I don't know, dispersed. So it hit the highway. I was like, okay, Moses in the burning bush, which had been a theme that weekend. Hit the car and it went up the left side of my body. Nothing like crazy, but it felt like my ankle was rolled. My eardrum had sort of felt like it popped, although it didn't. And my girl, she was like, what the fuck? I was like, what the literal fuck? And for whatever reason, I took it as like, you gotta change shit now, girlfriend. You don't have 3 to 4 years. You gotta like go home and quit your job. I was like, no, no, no. So I pull over, I gather myself, we get back on the highway, we go to the airport, and we got off at the airport, and there was a sign where I parked the car that was like, literally like, lightning something. I looked at the photo the other day, lightning something, and I was like, what? That's a weird thing to see here. And then I went into the airport, there was a bunch of female monks, and I was like, okay, sure, whatever that is. And then I see this backpack out in front of me with these angel wings on it, sparkling, and I was like, okay. And I like to think things are wings from the universe. I'm like, cool, yeah, sure, angel wings. We go inside the airport. I love a massage. It's my favorite thing at the airport. And so me and this girl that had been in the car, I was like, why don't you go first? I'll sit over here and wait in this random part of this big airport there. And someone's giving an employee tour while I'm waiting, and all of a sudden they open up the break room door, and I look over, and the backpack is there, wings facing me, and I can hear my spirit guides laughing, being like, we're not fucking around, girl. Yeah, take that as a sign. We're with you. And I was like, oh, fuck me. I'm going to have to quit everything. And then the lightning grounded all the flights at the airport, and we had to stay overnight that night. And they were like, see? I was like, okay, listen, you guys are brutal, but thank you. And for whatever reason, I would say from there on in, I've been fairly tightly connected with listening to my intuition at greater and greater levels. So I went home and I ignored it for about a month. The pain in my body of ignoring it was so great that it's that whole idea of like pain of remaining the same becomes greater than the pain of change. And so by early November, I was like, fine, I'll take the leap. I can always go backwards, but I don't know why. And like, they were like, you have to quit. Like, it's so important. And I was like, why is it so this timing is insane. And so I was going to London for work. I was going to do some human design training. So I was like, okay, but can I quit after that? They're like, it's going to be tight, but you can do it. Okay. I go to post my apartment before I leave, thinking when I come back I'll rent it out. Apartment's rented in 6 hours for like more than average money that was getting in that area. I'm like, okay. Well, that happened. I go, have a great time in London. I come back, I go to try and quit. I can't find my boss for 2 days. On the third day when I go to quit, 3 top executives had just given their notice. So I quit. I'm like, I am so sorry. But because of the timing of my quitting, he was like, but we really it's going to be hard to find a replacement while that's going on. Can we keep you on? We'll give you a retainer or like a completion bonus. I was like, sure, but I also don't have anywhere to live. No problem. And they paid for me to live somewhere for 6 weeks in one of the most expensive cities in the world. I had no savings. I had a line of credit against my home that I was going to use in case. I knew my job, I could easily find remote part-time work. But all of a sudden now I had a bunch of savings, plus I could save my salary because I wasn't going to be paying for housing. And on top of it, they hired me back remote part-time to support just regular recruitment in the company. And I don't know if anyone's ever listened to Lacey Phillips, but I used to be like, those bitches are fucking making this magical shit up. And then I was like, okay, maybe this manifestation may take a leap when you actually are supposed to. Shit is real. And thus began my transition then. Within 8 weeks, I was out leaving Vancouver, got to Sedona, Arizona, because that's where Spirit told me to move, for March 1st. We all know what happened by March 15th, 2020. And I was like, oh, I see the urgency. You guys didn't think I'd quit if I was still in my job when this happened. They're like, yeah, we knew. Okay. And so the journey has been a lot of healing, a lot of undoing and unwinding of 20 plus years of working in a very specific way, and going inward in ways that are extremely painful for me, because I didn't have a relationship with my feelings. I thought feelings were good or bad, mostly bad. I didn't have self-trust in an entrepreneurial way for myself. I was constantly comparing myself, trying to figure out how other people were doing it. And I had to slowly unravel all of that. I had to repattern my entire nervous system because it was so shot. I just had to do a lot of work. And not in the sense of working hard anymore, because I've really let that go. That was the beginning of the journey. But even just to soften into acceptance, soften into process, soften into feeling, going from not even knowing what a feeling was to then learning how to name them, feel them versus intellectualize them, to embracing them, to crying all the time, to then finding deep safety to just feel. Finding deep safety to trust myself and my voice. Finding deep safety in that I was the safest person versus anything outside of myself. Connecting to creating money in new and different ways that weren't working hard for somebody else, which is still sometimes a challenge because I believe it's easier. And so the rest of the story will unfold as we go through this podcast. But what I share is always from lived experience, either through my own life or walking through with a client of mine through their own experience. I have been at the extreme of not thinking anything I do currently was even a reality. And while I believe, always intuitive, I completely rejected it, thought it was crazy, literally probably was worried myself that I had a mental illness at one point. So I've been through it. I've stepped through all those pieces. And here I stand today, I believe, with a deeper balance of masculine and feminine, doing and intuiting, living my truth. And this podcast, for whatever reason, is the current piece of the puzzle that needed to come forward for my own personal expression, for my own inner knowing that I've been sitting on for actually 3 years. And I hope to continue to share the journey, the realizations, my own lived experience with you. So thank you for sitting through episode 1. I'm excited to see what unfolds in this process of sharing. If you love this podcast, or even just like it, sure, you can subscribe and like and share with those that might benefit as well. I can't wait to share the next episode and figure out the perfect flow, because we're just going to trial and error our way through it. And thank you for being here.